All right, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Real Estate Investor Podcast. Brett Bernard, Nick Gibson, Jeff McNett, and our wonderful friend who's joined us today, Mrs. Jo Garner, who's the mortgage guru that we're going to be talking to today. So y'all stick around. We're going to have a lot of good information.
Are you thinking about investing in real estate, building your net worth and your income, but you're just not sure where to start? I'm Jo Garner. I'm a mortgage officer and an investor. Let's explore your options on financing your investment property. Connect with me at jogarner.com. Call or text me 901-482-0354. Proud to be a sponsor of It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere Real Estate Podcast.
All right, welcome back. Jo, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're back again. We're going to have a lot of good stuff to talk about. We are missing somebody. Somebody's missing in this room, and I don't even know who it is.
Who? Never heard of her.
I don't know. Our palmy British producer, Richard, is across the pond with his family, probably eating his bangers and mash, and fish and chips, and whatever other crap they eat there.
Having his after-dinner fag on the deck.
That is a very offensive statement.
That's what they call cigarettes over there.
So he's not here, so we'll probably beat up on him quite a bit. So I've been following these two British guys that flew to the U.S. and decided, of all places in America, to go to Louisiana for about a month. And they traveled all over Louisiana, ate crawfish, went gator hunting, did all kinds of stuff. And it's actually very hilarious. So I'm going to play this video because the question was asked, 100 Brits against 100 Americans. Have y'all seen that question? So apparently there's a thing going on in Britain where there are people on video saying, I would put 100 Brits against 100 Americans. I personally think that's a dumb idea if you're British, but, that's just because I'm American. And I'm sure the British think that they would do well with, 100 of them against 100 of us. But this guy from Britain made a very funny video, and I want to play it. I'm going to send it to
where
Richard.
You get the Americans.
Well, as long as they're not from the North.
Yeah.
No offense.
If you got them from California, they might have a fighting chance.
100 Brits versus 100 Americans. I've been asked to answer this question so many times, so I'm going to answer it now. I'm a Brit that has spent a lot of time in America, so I feel I'm qualified to answer this question. And the Brits don't stand a chance. All right? I'm going to say one thing, all right? 1776 didn't go too well. And secondly, have you shook the hand of an American? I'm talking a man who is a farmer. He's got calluses for days, hands like shovels. They shake your hand and your hand comes out like that. It crushes your hand. I'm not getting involved with that. Paul Revere, never mind the British are coming, mate. The British are leaving. The British are leaving because I'm not getting involved with that. The Brits don't stand a chance. I can't handle the American weather. How am I supposed to handle 100 American men? I ain't doing it, mate. I'm not getting involved. You think I'm getting involved with that? Absolutely not.
So that's from a British guy who visited America and of all places, Louisiana, and realized immediately that 100 Brits against 100 Americans would not even be a contest. So Richard, I know you're producing this right now. You're probably listening to it. You just need to know your own countrymen are saying y'all are a bunch of fluffy snowflakes. So let's get that out of the way. I thought that was hilarious. So I follow these guys a lot, and they went to all the great little restaurants in Louisiana and went crawfish boils, and they're very funny.
Where'd you find them at?
I was just scrolling through Facebook and just saw Brit visits Louisiana because I'm from Louisiana, so I get a lot of anything Louisiana I get a link to. And then the last video he did showed him waking up the day they were leaving Louisiana, and he woke up and he had a big jar of Tony Chachere's seasoning on his pillow next to him, and he woke up and gave it a kiss, picked it up, put it in his suitcase, and said, we're going back to Britain. These people aren't ready for this. Good stuff. All right, Jo, let's get into our topic today.
Yeah.
Well, actually, before we do that, I want to bring up something that came up this week in my situation, and I want our listeners to understand this when they're doing purchases on their own and not using a licensed agent. I'm going to give you an example of what could happen. And this just happened to me this week. So that's why I want to bring it up. So anybody heard of memorandum of contract?
Yes.
So memorandum of contract, and I didn't know this until I spoke to a title attorney about a situation we have where there was a contract on a property that fell through. And the seller of that contract was upset. So they went and filed the contract in the records. What I didn't know is the filing of that contract in the records puts a lien and a cloud against that property.
All right, let's back up. Why did they do that? Back up.
Well, let's give you an example. Contract falls apart. And let's say buyer backs out and says, fine, I'm backing out. You can keep my earnest money for whatever reason. Normally, you'd think that solves the problem, right? The legal matter is taken care of. The injured party's been made whole and everything's good. But that seller still has a right to take that contract and go down to the courthouse and file it against that property, right?
The seller?
Or the buyer. Let's flip it around. Let's say the buyer backs out and the buyer's pissed. The buyer can go file that contract, puts a lien against the house. So then when that seller goes to resell that house, guess what? It's got a lien or a cloud on the title, which forces them to contact the previous buyer that put the memorandum of contract on the property. And then that buyer says, all right, I know you're not going to sell me the house, but I want $5,000 to release it.
Well, that just doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right, but it happens a lot. So at that point, your only options are is you pay the guy $5,000 to release, or you've got to file suit in court, and that's going to drag out for the next year. So when a contract falls apart, if you're dealing with an agent that understands what they're doing, they're going to put that language in there somewhere. If you were to put in special stipulations in the event of default, the resolutions are, and you put in there, neither buyer nor seller can file memorandum of contract. That alleviates the legal liability. However, if they file it anyway, it's still going to go on title. You're still going to have to go to court and get it taken off. So you're just creating problems. So I would just tell any of our listeners, if you are out there, we're getting a lot of people right now that are not using agents, right? They're calling around on the phone, different agents here and there, looking at properties, doing deals themselves. If you don't quite understand the legalities of these contracts, just be careful, because you can get snagged in something very quickly. Do we need to start putting that language in all of our? Well, I mean, between a buyer and seller, typically no. Investor to investor, no. But no knock against wholesalers. But the biggest. So it's the wholesalers that are doing this. The biggest group that's doing that are the wholesalers. So you've got, I want to sell my house, but I don't want to pay a commission. I don't want to hire an agent. And a wholesaler calls me and says, hey, I'll give you $150,000 for it. Give me 60 days to close. Okay, great. If that contract doesn't work for whatever reason, that wholesaler could take the contract and file it against my property. Now I'm beholden to him for a fee or money or something in order to get that cleared so I can sell to the next buyer. Now it's starting to sound like a scam a little bit. Yeah. There ought to be someone we could lobby to look at that. Well, I would assume after the legislation last year pertaining to wholesalers in Tennessee that required them to use a licensed real estate agent if they are selling property in the state of Tennessee. Yeah, because the deal with the wholesaler, and I get the wholesalers, I picked up Aunt Judy's house I've got an assignment for $50,000. So anything over $50,000, I make money. Right. Even if I don't care if it's $5,000, $20,000. So if I have a 60-day agreement with you and I don't find a buyer for your house, that becomes null and void. But then I go file that lien and I end up getting my $5,000 anyway. Well, that's kind of a scam to me. Legally, you can't go file if the contract's invalid. And I don't know. I would really hope that someone at the records office would look at the contract and you're filing something that expired 2 weeks ago. This is not a contract. If they don't and they file it, then you still have an issue of got to go to court to get that taken off. But that's the question. It's not a valid contract. It's been null and void for 2 weeks. The person at the clerk's office or whatever files it anyway. That was a mistake on her part. That doesn't matter. Shouldn't be an issue. The clerk has to file whatever you bring them. You know that. But I can take a quick claim deed down to the court. If I go to court and saying, hey, they filed this bogus contract, it's been expired for 2 weeks, a judge would just throw it out and say, take the lien off. But you would still have to file, get an attorney, go to court, right? Yeah. So, but I could go right now down to the courthouse with a quick claim deed that I've signed saying that Joe Garner just quit claimed her house to me and file it. That's what title fraud is. That's how easy it is, because the the records office has to take what you bring them and they have to file it in its current form.
Why?
They have no choice.
Because
they have no choice.
They don't have the time to do the due diligence and research to make sure it's correct.
They don't want to do that. They are required to file it.
Right.
Period. So that's where the title fraud comes in, is it's so easy to do something like that. Now, it's easy to get untangled, obviously, because we can easily prove it was fraud, but it still takes you getting an attorney. Mm-hmm. You got to spend some money. You got to go to court and you got to untangle it. So I just want our listeners to be aware that if you're not dealing with a reputable licensed agent in your research and your purchasing or selling your property,
well,
there are a lot of holes out there you can fall into.
Okay. So
in most
bad
of those,
word of the day is wholesaler, I guess.
No, I'm not knocking wholesalers. I'm just the three instances that this has happened where someone's come to me to sell their property and we got a cloud on the title. So now I'm having trouble getting it sold because there's a cloud on the title is because a previous wholesaler did that.
I don't know.
The seller, the owner, was unaware of it.
It just seems like, let's say Joe was selling her house to me, and then all of a sudden I decided I'm going to back out of it. Mm-hmm. I would have never thought, and she even gives me my earnest money back because she's a nice lady. I would have never even given it 2 seconds worth of thought. Well, you know, that mean old lady gave me my earnest money back. I'm going to go down there and do a contract, memorandum of contract, just to make her life miserable. Why? What's your motivation?
Well, I did have a lot situation between two builders.
I wouldn't even do that if she didn't give me my earnest money back.
Well, you're a nice guy, Jeff.
What's my motivation?
Money. You'll still get something out of it eventually. It's just a lien against the property. That's going to require someone to make the effort to get it taken off.
That needs to change. Somebody needs to lobby to the legislature.
Now that they've cracked down on wholesalers in Tennessee, you'll probably see future legislation to try to clean up some of this stuff, because I did not realize that was a possibility until. So I'll give you a perfect example. There were some lots that a builder of mine decided to sell to one of my other builders. 2 days before closing, the builder selling it decides, you know what, I'm going to keep them and build on them. So he pulled out of the contract. Next thing you know, we got a nice email from the other builder's attorney basically citing we're going to file a memorandum of contract against those lots. And that immediately let us know, guess what? You're never going to build these lots. You're going to end up in court spending $10,000 in attorney's fees to get this untangled because they were within their right to do so.
Well, now that I understand.
Now that came from an attorney.
That I understand completely.
But it's as simple as, I'm mad at Joe. Deal didn't work out, and I'm just going to piss her off, and I'm going to go put a memorandum of contract against her property and force her to either pay me or take me to court. It's easily doable.
But I can't just draft a contract and take it down there and do that.
No. You got to have a legitimate contract that's still active.
Binding agreement, binding contract.
Right. But
both signatures.
If you did that, that'd be considered fraud. Much like mortgage fraud is when you create a fake quitclaim deed and go down and file it, taking someone's title. You know, thank goodness there's enough judges with half a brain cell that understand that's fraud and they can untangle it. But it still costs you time and money. So anyway, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I just want to make sure everybody realizes that if you're not working with a qualified licensed agent, I know there's some out there that are dumb as bricks. I get it. So everybody's had a bad experience.
There's a lot of smart ones out there that
but there
might
are
not
a lot
know
of
what you were just talking about.
There's a lot of smart ones out there
that may not know what you just talked about.
Probably not. There are a lot of smart ones that have legal backgrounds, accounting backgrounds, contracting backgrounds. There are a bunch of us out there that understand this business way more than most agents. So just get you a good one. Call us at 901-692-7401. Go to our website, mymemphisinvestmentproperties.com. Okay, enough with that BS.
Let's talk about money.
Let's talk about money.
My favorite
topic. Talk about the good side.
Give us your contact information first.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love to talk about money. I love to do scenarios and make the right mortgage fit and make the process easy. And the way you contact me is jogarner.com. You can call or text me 901-482-0354. And let's talk about our favorite topic, which is money.
Well, let's real quick tell everybody the types of loans, because y'all have just went through a rewriting of a lot of new products.
We sure did. Very exciting.
What are investors looking at today as far as financing tools to buy real estate?
Well, there are two two categories, and one of them is just your old traditional fallbacks, the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, conventional loans, 20% down, fully documented and all of that. There are some pluses for using that program. The ones that we're using the most are very exciting. They're called DSCR loans, which most of your listeners have heard that.
Debt service cover ratio.
Yes, and it's very low documentation. They don't look at any income except they're comparing how much the lease income is on that subject property you're buying, or the market lease as determined by the appraiser of what that is, compared to what your PITI, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance association fee is. And you don't even have to show tax returns or anything. You have to have decent credit and at least 20% down, sometimes 25%, depending on what type of loan you're doing. Some investors call me and say, Joe, I don't know where I'm going to get my 25%. I said, you know what? There's still nothing down loans out there. It's just you have to be creative.
Sure.
You have to find secured credit lines that you can use, like borrowing against a 401k, borrowing, maybe doing a HELOC on another property to get that 25% down if that's what you need.
Right.
But
and that's legitimate if you're borrowing it from yourself and not getting a gift from a friend or
And there's some rules about that, and they vary greatly between one DSCR product and another. Because remember, Brett, these are in-house portfolio loans,
right.
So they're designed differently. We have, like right now, we've got 7 really good DSCR programs. Every one of them have different guidelines, and so if you have a person who comes in and they like we've had that needs a gift from family, they have a family gift. There's a product for that.
Oh, you can do that now.
You can do that now. You can't do it on all the programs.
Hold on. Jeff wasn't talking about that. Jeff was just talking about, I need another 20,000, and all of a sudden, presto, it shows up in his account. Remember?
Oh yeah, right.
And we just pretty much said that's bank fraud.
Right. We have to show where it
came from.
You got to track
it.
No, she was telling me you can't borrow money from your parents to put down on the house.
Sure you can, as long as it's tracked and it's considered a gift, right?
Well, borrowing and a gift are two different things. But a gift, some DSCR products will not allow a gift on investment property. All DSCRs are investment property. But nowadays, some of them will. If you put a certain amount in yourself, like 5% or something like that. So whatever your situation is, what we want to do is talk with you, get the loan application, look at the credit, and now we're going to be able to know which product is going to fit you best. And then the next thing we're going to do is look for which products fit you that have the best pricing on them.
You said there were 7 different types of
We have 7 new DSCRs. There's
how do they vary without going on all day about it?
Some of them will allow gifts and some of them won't. That's one thing.
So you just got to dig through it and find the right one for the right person.
Some of them.
And no credit. Did you say no credit check earlier?
Oh, no, there is credit check. We just don't check the income. We do check the credit. Some of them do not want inexperienced investors. Some of them don't care. They'll take an inexperienced investor. They may ask for a little bit more down.
Am I going to pay a higher interest rate for that inexperience and
No, just a little more money down.
Okay.
Yeah. So it still makes your ratio work because they're not going up on the rate.
Who's a DSCR loan good for? A young first-time investor that
one would
has a lot of money?
That one would be, but the rest of them are good for very experienced investors. And it just depends on which category your borrower is in as to which DSCR scenario you'd put them in.
So I can pull money out of my equity in my home if I needed to put 2 down payments on 2 rental properties.
Absolutely.
As long as you're borrowing it from yourself or taking it from your account.
I don't get the no reported income. It seems like we're going back to the post-2008, pre-2008 days where everybody was just buying anything everywhere and never made one mortgage payment on it and got foreclosed a year later. What's all that about?
Well, remember that the DSCR loan is not a residential loan. It is a business loan.
But I want to know you're going to be able to pay me my money back, though.
That's true. That's why they look at that lease income, because the DSCR program is looking at the property you're buying as a business. And they want to make sure that that business, just like any business, has a good pro forma, that it's going to perform, and it's going to basically, that as Brett, you and Brett talk about a lot, the tenant's going to pay that, not the borrower.
Well, yeah,
anyway.
but even the lender's going to have to factor in, are they always going to get that rent, or is the tenant going to
Well, but you got to realize too, with investors, at least the ones that we're dealing with, I mean, they're pretty well to do. They've done well in their careers. They've got a lot of cash stacked away, and they can absorb a couple of months of a tenant being a vacated property. And I'm sure the lender has to also know that it's not going to be 100% rented all the time. I get what Jeff's saying, but I would say this is a little different than 08. In 08, basically they just touch your wrist and said, oh, your heart's beating. Great. Here's $300,000. Go buy your dream home.
Well, that's the way it was. I mean, I used to carry a $1 million line of credit with a local bank, and it was kind of an emergency fund, if anything. But then after 08, I decided to take advantage of it. And they're like, oh, no, we're not doing that anymore. I mean, it was like...
Well, and the DSCR, they do require some reserves.
They stopped calling me after that.
Yeah, I bet they did. Yeah, the DSCRs do require some reserve money because they also realize you may have a month or two that you don't have a tenant. Or you may have a situation where, oh, my gosh, I got to do some repairs on this thing. So they make sure that you do have some reserve money. Now, most people for reserves, they'll use a 401k.
Joe, you've got to explain what that account means. Joe, what do you call that fund?
Oh, yeah. Well, I call it an OPOOP fund.
There you go. The OP fund.
OP fund. Yes.
Ours is OS fund, but she stepped it down a little bit and calls it OP fund.
Yeah.
OP, yeah.
And those times are going to happen. Now, let me say this about reserves, because the last two investors I've talked to I said, well, you can use your 401k for reserves. And they said, I don't want to pull money out of the 401k. You don't have to. All you have to do is show that you could under a hardship, because it's just reserves. You're not using it to close.
You just show them a statement. So once you show them the statement with your funds, you don't have to withdraw. You just have to show the statement where you have your reserves set aside. So you don't necessarily have to have that cash laying in your checking account.
And that you have the ability to take it out if you had to.
Okay. Got it.
What else you got? You do flipping?
I do a fix and flip, but I typically I have a product for that. I don't really... Personally, as a loan mortgage officer, my target market are people who are going to buy and hold for at least a year or two.
What's the downside to the fix and flip? Obviously, the rate's higher. Sure,
the rate is higher, and I don't do enough of them to really talk to what's out there. I have some other people that I use for that. I'm Craig. Yeah, you've met Craig and some others. Yeah.
So the hard money side of it is a totally different animal.
And the biggest risk for that is, I'm sure there's a time factor in that. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. If you don't sell the house, you have to come up with all the cash and pay the loan back, or will they give you an extension?
Hard money can be a great pathway, but I will say if you don't know what you're doing, it can be the end of your business.
I would think it'd be a good kid that doesn't have any money, needs to flip a few to make some cash, and then he uses that to put down payment on the third or fourth one.
And I want listeners to listen to me very carefully. If you run your numbers and you use the most conservative numbers you can, and it works, then do it. Don't take a house $120,000 ARV and say, well, I see one here for $130, and then base all your stuff on $125, $130. If you do, you're going to lose money and probably end up going in the hole and possibly even losing the property. We're doing a couple of flips right now. One of them we worked on, and we took every number we had and we made it the most conservative and overinflated the rehab and most conservative, added 6 months to the sale time. We did everything we could to make that deal not work, and it still works. So that tells me
that's a good deal.
It's a slam dunk.
So anything on top of that is just like icing on the cake.
Sure. So if you have to, shove a square peg in a round hole to hope you're going to make $10,000, you're already screwed before you even come out of the gate. So
you got to buy it right.
James is going to make a pretty good hit on this second one he's doing if it indeed sells in a week like you said it would.
Well, you asked me if I list it, it'll sell.
Well, you're going to list it.
You two bozos list it, it'll be sitting there until next year.
You're going to list it. You're going to list it if I have to throw in a bottle of Johnny Walker
Excuse
Blue.
me, but both of y'all just closed properties and got paid this week. Congratulations.
I hadn't even seen the wire yet.
It should be. It was sent this morning.
Joe, while we've got you here, I want to discuss the property that I've been discussing with you because this is an issue for me, so it might be an issue for somebody else. So to bring y'all up to speed, Matt and I purchased a property.
Right.
A great property. We couldn't turn it down. It was a great deal in Fraser. We renovated it. We used HELOC money from his, HELOC, his personal home to buy it with.
Right.
Because we had to move on it so quickly, we didn't have time to get our LLC and everything set up prior to purchasing it. So now we have the LLC set up. We eventually want to get the loan and that, deed to the property within the business, the LLC. So we did all the rehab ourselves. We know that we've got the equity to pull all of that money back out, the Burr method, so that we can go buy more properties.
Right.
And then yourself and everybody we've talked to said, hey, once you move it to the LLC, then that starts a whole 12-month seasoning period. But the property already has equity in it. It's already got a tenant, via MHA paying. So what are some of the options out there?
Okay, well, we could go with a different DSCR product, Nick, but it would be still 6 months on the seasoning time. It'd be 6 months, and the pricing may not be as good as the 12-month seasoning. There's probably a chance that if both of you guys were on the DSCR loan, we might be able to carry over that seasoning from your partners already owning it.
Yeah, because we've had it right now, right at 3 months.
Right. And your first question to me off the air here was if you went on it without him, even though you're part owners of the LLC, the loan is going to be in the LLC's name. It's going to vest in the LLC. But because he's not on it, it would start that seasoning over again. Now, I can, because we do have multiple DSCR products, we can check. I can try to find one that would allow if both of you are on there. Right now, I don't have one unless both of you were on there.
Right. And however we need to do it is fine. It just, to me, not in the mortgage business, it doesn't understand what transferring that to the business name, what does that have to do? Why does it have to season when the equity is there in the property? Why can't we just go ahead and pull that equity out, get the loan on it since we have a MHA tenant in place, paying the bills? Well,
I absolutely hear what you're saying, and you're preaching to the choir, but I get your point.
I just don't understand the significance of, okay, now it's in the business name all of a sudden, so now you've got a whole new seasoning period.
That's a good question.
You couldn't just put it under Build 901, or you wanted a separate company?
Well, we have a separate company that we're going to hold our properties in and we're going to flip in.
Investments.
We just had quick access to capital to purchase the property on Matt's personal house. So we bought the property, then, okay, hey, we'll get it in the LLC. Now we want to take all of our capital back out of it so that we can go buy more, and we're running into
So you need 6 months before you can refi out of it.
That's if they put the loan in the name of the LLC, invest in the LLC. If you did a two-step deal where you put it in both your names,
and then do a quick claim and move it over.
Then quick claimed over.
Well, and I'm all ears. We want to do is both of these properties should be able to recoup all of our initial investment back, and we want to go start growing and buy more property. So we're just looking to be able to get our cash back so we can put it to work again.
Well, let's talk after this, because there is a way to do it if we do it as a two-step.
We're all ears. We're open.
Because you're still going to get the money, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've had, other opportunities, come up that we just said, hey, man, our cash is tied up right now. We need to be able to free it up so that we can go work with more.
Right. It's all about what that investor needs, and that's where we go shopping. We've got right now 7. We're adding more DSCR portfolio loans to our in-house products, but we also have the ability to broker out to other people. Now, the pricing isn't as good, but sometimes it's not the price that's the most important thing. It's getting cash out and how much cash out and all of that really matters to that individual investor.
And, that's our business model, because we're also in the construction business. That's kind of the model that we followed. Is we're going to buy it right, we're going to renovate it at our cost, and when we leave 20% in the deal, we should be able to get every bit of our cash back out of it.
Brett, are you You okay over there? This is quiet if I've heard you on a podcast.
I'm just listening.
I'm 4 years.
I'm just absorbing all the wealth of knowledge you three boneheads have.
So
Hey, look, Nick and I just commented.
Two boneheads. I'm sorry.
I'm just
sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to call you a bonehead.
I
just
figured
full of questions.
if I'm having this issue, then there might be somebody else out there having
So
this issue.
we have dealt with this issue with Amish. We had him on a couple of episodes ago, where he did hard money and then went to refi out of it and had all kinds of problems simply because of seasoning, and then appraisals were way lower on the refi than they were on the initial purchase. Just a bunch of stuff. So, which brings me back to, if you get yourself a good agent that understands what they're doing, you won't get caught in those bad situations.
So the DCSR loan, it's more of a portfolio package type loan. How does that work if you just go traditional, conventional?
Well, I do have one.
You're buying one house at a time, but what if I want to buy 10 houses? I have to get approved for 10 different loans?
Well, on a traditional mortgage, you're going to be limited on how many financed properties you can own. That's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac.
What would the limit be?
10.
Okay. But with the investment loan, you can bundle 50, 60, whatever you wanted, depending on your...
Well, you say bundle, but we would close each one of those properties individually.
Okay, but
Yeah,
you would have one lump monthly sum payment though back, right? You wouldn't get 10.
You'd have 10 different
mortgage
payments.
Oh,
Yeah, in order to do what you want to do, you would actually have to go to, there's a few of them out there, not many portfolio lenders where they'll do one lump loan on 10 properties.
Yeah, mostly banks.
The only downside of that is when, let's say you got 10 properties and next year you decide 2 of them are redheaded stepchildren and you want to get rid of them.
Then you've got to refigure everything.
Well, a lot of lenders, it's very difficult for them to release 1 or 2 out of that pot because it's one loan. So you got to be. And
then you got to restructure everything when you add 5 or 10 more.
And here's the thing: is I did it last year for one of my clients in California. He had 7 properties, and we sold them off one by one. The crazy thing is, he's now down to 1 property, and his payment's still $5,200 a month.
Yeah, that's the part.
Now he's put a bunch of cash in the bank. But by the time he's done, he's going to use all the cash to pay the loan to the bank because they didn't adjust the payment based on the amount of money.
Right.
And I wouldn't have a problem with paying that $5,200 if it was, most of it was going towards the principal.
Yeah, well, it is. I'm assuming it is because he's already paid off 6 of them. They're paid off. So he's got $90,000 balance left on a house that's worth $110,000, and his note's $5,200 a month. So I'm assuming in the next year or 2 he's going to have that paid for.
Yeah, he'll pay that off quick.
Yeah. So all right, well, that will conclude our show. Joe, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Joe, give everybody your name, your email address, your phone number, your blood type, shoe size, and all the good stuff they can reach you.
All right.
I'll take your credit card number too.
All right. So to talk about your money and how to make that deal work best for you on the money side, connect with me, Joe Garner. I'm a mortgage officer. JOGarner.com. You can pick up my book, Choosing the Best Mortgage, the Quickest Way to the Life You Want, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Also, my webpage where the online easy peasy loan application is at JOGarner.com.
And you left off your radio show.
Oh, yeah.
Every Saturday, iHeartRadio, 600
Yeah, you guys
WRC.
are on there.
We were just on there last Saturday with
Yeah, it's you can pick up the podcast with show notes also at JOGarner.com.
Yep. Great time. We had a fun time. All right, guys. Thank you for listening today, and we will be back next week with another informative session. Screw you, Richard. I hope you're enjoying your time in Britain.
Holiday.
Kiss my ass.
For more common sense real estate tips, listen and subscribe at 5o'clocksomewherepodcast.com. The 5 O'Clock Somewhere Real Estate Investor Podcast is a Sound Ideas Group production.